Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, October 29th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you. No Jed Lowry this week. Jed is on assignment, not for Rates and Barrels, but for Cap, which we'll learn a lot more about next week when Jed returns to the program. On this episode, we dig into the Blue Jays Game 4 win over the Dodgers. The series will go back to Toronto after Game 5, regardless of outcome. Very exciting for Blue Jays fans. Very exciting for the neutrals out there, too, to watch this one play out. It's been a great series so far. Let's dig into it. The Jays get that Game 4 win behind a Vlad Jr. homer off of Shohei Ohtani and a 4-run 7th inning. The runs just come in bunches for this lineup. I think it's just one of the main stories for them throughout this postseason. They can score from any part of the lineup, and they can string together timely hits and things that just make it really tough to navigate that lineup on a night-to-night basis. A lot of ground to cover within this game. I think the starting pitching was generally very good. Shane Bieber pitched very well, and I tried to pre-write the script in the rundown of what was going to happen as a joke, and I was somewhat right. I wrote down Blue Jays win Game 4 and hand Shohei Ohtani his worst start as a Dodger, which would be a little extreme to say that as fact, but it was his lowest game score in a start since a late August trip to Colorado. So I wasn't completely wrong. The other thing I wrote was Shane Bieber dominates with his kick change, and he didn't dominate with that pitch. He didn't even throw it that much. I think he threw it 14% of the time. But he threw a really good one to get one of his 2 strikeouts against Ohtani. So I'm going to give myself a solid B on the script writing side and trying to, predict things that were actually going to happen in this game.
Yeah, it was a good outing from Bieber. Actually, to me, it was a good outing from Ohtani. I think, given the circumstances, I thought it was a decent outing from him. He made 2 mistakes, probably. And one was not even a mistake. So the first one, obviously, Vladdy's homer. And we can see here that the target is low and the acquisition is high. And if you look at the sweeper, it had 3 inches less horizontal break and an inch less vertical break than usual. I just wanted to look at this because sometimes you throw high sliders, even high sweepers to some pitchers. That is a possibility that they might have been doing it on purpose. But this one was a hanger that got banged. And you also wouldn't probably throw a high slider to Vladimir Guerrero, who's a high ball hitter. So that just was a mistake. And that was a 2-run homer. And I also thought it was interesting to kind of look through the win probability report for the game, because after the Vladdy homer, the game switches to about let's see here. Vladdy homer was in the third. Right there on his homer, it switches to 60-40 Blue Jays. This might be surprising to you, but it's 60-40 the rest of the game until a span of 4 batters between the 6th and the 7th. And that's when the game is decided. So the game is decided. The biggest win probability shifts in the game are 1, Vladimir Guerrero hits a homer. 2, Ernie Clement hits a double. We'll get into that one in a second. Now, if you're listening, try to think of what you think the other 2. The one player did the other 2. And there's a Toronto Blue Jays pitcher, Mr. Mason Fluharty, come on down. His fly out to Max Muncy and strikeout of Tommy Edman were the 3rd and 4th biggest swings in win expectancy in the game. The Dodgers were threatening. They had people on. It was the end of Bieber. Bieber was losing velocity. There's a cool chart on the breakdowns there. The third chart down shows you velocity by inning. Bieber was 93 in the first inning, 93-2, 92-8, 93-2, fourth, 91-9, fifth, 92, sixth, 91-8. So he was definitely losing velo over the course of this start. And in that last inning, what did he do? He came in and Freddie Freeman singled. Will Smith lined out sharply. Then Teoscar Hernandez singles. And now you've got first and second with one out. And Mason Fluharty came in and got those big outs. Now it's 70-30. And just one last bit about win expectancy that I find interesting is it's 70-30 there. And then when Ernie Clement doubles, it's 85-15. And that's basically it. It's not when the runs score. And this is like a math thing, but it's also a psychological thing. So by the time Ernie Clement pushes second and third with his double, second and third with no outs, the expected number of runs scored is over 2. So the score is 2-1, but the score in math terms, the expected score at that moment is already 4-1. And I think it's interesting because as fans, we sort of skip ahead sometimes. And we think, the big play was the Andres Jimenez opposite field thing, or the Ty France ground ball that scored him, or any of the stuff later in the inning that really broke it open. But no, it was the Ernie Clement double that set it all up. And you don't always remember that as fandom. And the last bit on the Ernie Clement double, that was the other mistake Ohtani made, but it wasn't a target mistake. He threw it right to the target. Low on Ernie Clement is a place you can get swings and misses, but especially on fastballs. But he had just thrown him a curveball low, so I think they primed him to look there. Clement hit a big double, so just some lessons in psychology and win expectancy and how math interacts with the way we look at games. But yeah, I think it was 2 mistakes from Ohtani, and then Bieber just wasn't allowed to make the big mistake. It took him out just in time.
They let him make one because he talked his way into staying in the game. The first time John Schneider came out to go remove him, it was before Teoscar Hernandez singled to put that second runner on for the Dodgers, which made things more hairy for Mason Fluharty. But Fluharty getting Muncy to fly out and then striking out Edman on 3 pitches, threw him a really nasty back foot sweeper. That was huge. That shut the door on what really was like the best chance in a while for the Dodgers to put a lot of runs on the board. I mean, I think you look at this game and you think, wow, the only run the Dodgers had before the 9th inning was a sac fly in the 2nd inning, which speaks to the quality of the work Bieber did, Fluharty did. They put together a great team pitching performance. It's always a bit of a tension, a tug of war about, did the pitchers pitch well or did the hitters fail to execute? And one of the lesser discussed things on our show, I think, up to this point is the Dodgers lineup just hasn't quite been the Dodgers lineup we're used to. We've seen some massive performances and big swings. Freddie's walk-off in Game 3, Ohtani doing what he did in that game, what he did against the Brewers to eliminate them. Like, there have been some big offensive performances, but it hasn't been that consistent 4.5, 5 runs per game sort of juggernaut that we've come to expect. And whether you give some or most of the credit to the Blue Jays pitching, or you put some or most of the blame on the Dodgers bats, I think that's maybe in the eye of the beholder a little bit, because I saw Mike Petriello try to break that down earlier in the day on Wednesday. And is it making bad contact? Is it luck on the contact you're making? It's actually hard to tell in a sample size like this. I think he was looking at the World Series in particular, so you're only looking at a sample of 4 games of balls in play.
But he did make a good point, which is, I think the narrative is small ball against power. The difference in strikeouts between the two teams is 3. Both of them are striking out less than league average right now. So that's not necessarily it. But he did point out that the areas of contact, the types of contact are totally different. The Dodgers are going in the air like 70% of the time, and there just aren't any hits in the air. You're going for power when you're doing that. You just look at batting averages on fly balls versus batting averages on ground balls. You'll see that, line drives are where hits are. but hitting in the air is where the power is. It is interesting because the Dodgers do not stand out when it comes to bat speed. As a team, they are, what are they? I think they're below average.
Mookie's low. Freddie Freeman's low too, right? We've talked about that. He's more.
The Dodgers are 22nd in bat speed.
Yeah.
They stand out by having good tilt. They have maybe the most tilt in the majors. Yeah, they are tied with the Tigers, most tilt in the majors. So they can murder low balls, and they can put those in the air. So they get a lot out of it. But I mean, maybe it's fair to ask if this is an approach that works during the regular season with maybe lesser pitchers and is not working as well right now. I think that could all change in one game.
Yeah. That's the question, right? It's like, well, will the Dodgers bats come to life? I don't know. I think they still could. I'm not watching these at bats and watching these guys saying they're overmatched and they're hopeless. Like they're just not coming through. Like I don't see anything deeply flawed. I think it's interesting that they were tied for second in WRC plus in the regular season, a 113 as a team, despite being 22nd in bat speed, right? I don't know if that's an indictment of bat speed not being as valuable as we want it to be necessarily, because I think who those hitters are and what they do matters, right? We know bat speed is important. It is helpful. It is a good thing to have. You'd rather have it than not have it. But if you don't have top end or even league average bat speed as a team, you might have an above average contact rate. You might have an above average ability to square pitches up. You might have the ability to recognize the pitches you can drive, and pull those in the air, and do a good job of taking pitches you can't drive and having a different sort of approach on those. That could be built into it, right? Is it possible that being average or even below average in bat speed in some instances as a team could just be the result of having some veteran hitters that have very good approaches, right? A swing, B swing, C swing in some instances. Maybe it's not exactly what's happening here. I'm just hypothesizing ways you could have a good lineup and still be average or worse in bat speed as a group.
I mean, one of the other ways is just to swing at the right pitches, and one thing that we do know from them is that, they were third best in chase rate, the Dodgers were on the season. And if you incorporate zone swing, the two teams ahead of them, the Brewers and the Yankees, that swung less often at walks, swung less often at strikes than the Dodgers. So the Dodgers have a really good plate approach. And also, there are some outliers on this team. Freddie Freeman, as I mentioned when I was talking about my bat speed situation, my bat speed presentation, he's a guy that is an exception. He does not look good. His comps aren't great. Like the Bo Bichette 37 swing plus. You know what I mean? It's like at some point you just look at the player and their results over the course of their career. And like Freddie Freeman told me once, I haven't cared about bat speed ever in my career, and I've done pretty well.
Yeah, and when he started, it was probably pretty
it's
hard to measure it. There weren't as many ways to get it, right?
Right, and it doesn't mean it's not valuable for player development or for a young player right now to think about. I mean, Max Clark just released a video of himself saying, "Update: swinging fast is good," and shows himself ripping the bat through. So, I generally still believe that bat speed is important, but I do believe it's less important for the veteran types of players that the Dodgers have.
Yeah. And I think it's worth reminding everybody, Frederick Charles Freeman is 36 years old.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know why I said his name the way we'd say, like, Charles E. Cheese.
Well,
but
they look a little old, because Mookie Betts looks a little tired, and Freeman's ankles, like, he doesn't look good when he's like running around, I don't think. He got thrown out as part of that boondoggle on the bases the other day. and I think generally just not moving as well. So, you know, in terms of youth on this team, it's Pages who got replaced in the lineup yesterday, and his manager said there might be changes to the lineup tomorrow.
Really?
So,
changes to the lineup. Okay. I think that change could include moving Mookie Betts down a little bit, too.
Yeah, you've been calling that one. The other one is maybe call for Pages, which is I've been talking about.
That one's a longer, prolonged, that's a long stretch of struggles for Andy Pages in the postseason. So for them
there
to
are no
make
other
that change,
buttons.
yeah.
There are no other buttons to push.
No. So they could play Edmonton center to start the game? I know they moved him out there the end of 3?
And that would allow you
Rojas?
Rojas at second?
Yeah, I guess you'd play Rojas.
I was just thinking call.
You could try to do that.
But you can't. If you do call for Pages, then call has to play center.
Yeah.
It's probably not ideal.
Well, okay. So we got some changes expected on the Dodgers side.
Maybe it just means moving guys around, like you're saying. So maybe it just means Will Smith didn't have a great game yesterday. 0 for 4. It'd be a little bit weird to go off of that and say, okay, now Will Smith, now you're batting second. But maybe that's what they're talking about. Maybe it's just moving guys up and down.
And by no means was it an excuse, and it's one game, so we'll never know. But I just wondered, as much as we did not like the aggressiveness of John Schneider using pinch runners to take out a few important bats over the course of Game 3, the silver lining in that, as we said yesterday, was rest. Maybe there was a little more fatigue on the Dodgers as a result of how Game 3 played out, right? Maybe that was part of the story, but a huge swing from Vlad Jr. against Ohtani. Really just a great combination of approaches and execution against Ohtani in that bullpen. I wonder if we've seen Blake Treinen for the last time in this series in anything that resembles an important matchup. Any game they're trying to keep close, I don't know if Blake Treinen appears in it in games 5, 6, and if it goes 7 in game 7. I'm having my doubts. I just don't think it's there. He came on after Bonda as part of that 4-run 7th, and it just doesn't look like Blake Treinen is right. You kind of like what you're saying with Freddie's ankles. Blake Treinen hasn't looked right for pretty much the entire postseason. And at some point, you have to stop pushing that button. I think because of the heavy usage of the entire bullpen over 18 innings, it was expected that Treinen was going to have some kind of role if they needed more than 3 outs at the end from Roki. Like Treinen was going to be on the short list of guys they could use because he was not as heavily used the previous day. But I think that's probably it for him as far as leverage spots in the series.
Yeah, I mean, one of the weird things about what happened with Treinen is that, the velo is down off of a seasonal average. So that's weird because that's down even more off of what you'd expect in the playoffs. Almost everybody gets like a half tick to plus of extra velo boost in the playoffs because of adrenaline and everything. They're just throwing their hardest. But in this game, he faced a lefty in Assenbarger and threw him a sinker on the outside part of the play. Why didn't he throw his fastball or his cutter, his four-seamer or his cutter? A sinker, a righty sinker to a lefty who hits real hard. He only was doing sinker and slider basically in this game. And I think it just speaks to maybe a lack of command. We saw the worst location plus numbers on the year for his career for Treinen. That has, I think, continued. So it is one of those things where it doesn't always show up really obviously in the velo and the shapes and stuff. Sometimes something is nagging you in a way that shows up in command. And I think that's what's going on with Treinen.
Yeah, so I think that could be among the changes, but a more rested pen for the Dodgers as Game 5 approaches will also change up that script a little bit. As much as we talk about Ohtani on the pod, we don't talk about him a lot as a starter. You mentioned really 2 kind of key mistakes in particular that got him. But just in terms of his mix and what he's been doing against righties and lefties and how the stuff has looked, now that he's fully stretched out in the postseason, and he was kind of throughout September for the most part too, what is your assessment of the Ohtani we see on the mound now compared to even the pre-second TJ Ohtani from a couple years back?
I don't think he's as good. I don't think he's all the way back. I mean, one of my examples, though, here is against righties and lefties in this last start, he threw 3 splitters total. And the splitter for him was a huge pitch at one point. It was a really important pitch.
We thought it was coming back with the start that he had in Game 4 of the NLCS. Like, that was Bobby Onardaya was right. That was probably as good as the splitters looked in a while.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I was trying to think of comps for Ohtani, and it's so stupid because I don't want to make a comp. I wanted to think of somebody other than another Japanese pitcher. I wanted to open it up to all pitchers. But I think at his best, Shohei Ohtani is a high-velocity Yu Darvish.
That's still very high praise.
No, I'm not damning him with praise at all.
That's a great comp if that's the best comp.
I think it is because you're thinking about, cutter, everything sort of cuts, not the greatest, four-seam shape, but like also throws tons of pitches. That's Ohtani at his best. Plus, he sits like 98. Now he's becoming a little bit tighter against lefties in this game yesterday. He was 90% four-seam fastball, curveball, cutter. That's fine. But it might be better if it was like sort of more 25, 25, 25 with the splitter in there, And then against righties, he was 90% four-seam fastball, sweeper, curve. So all these other pitches that, show up once, twice, 3 times a game are not where they were before. I think he focused on coming back with the four-seam and the sweeper, and the curveball came in third. And maybe next year he will be all the way back. Maybe the splitter will come back. Maybe he'll be more of a true sort of 6-7 pitch pitcher, and it'll all be there. But I think he focused on getting the velocity back and the breakers, and some of the other stuff is not quite where it used to be.
How about Zach Wheeler as another possible Ohtani comp?
Multiple fastballs. I think you would see Ohtani again, like he threw 1 sinker. I think if he was a true Wheeler comp, there'd be more sinkers in there. But it's not a bad one. Yeah,
and I think, Wheeler in his mid-30s,
more command than Ohtani.
A little more tweaking. There's still something about Ohtani. Maybe it's because of the time he's lost to injury. Maybe it's because as a two-way player, you leave the door open for this possibility that things could still change more. Like, he clearly has a feel for spin and can keep making adjustments. But how do you even try to apply any sort of aging curve to a two-way pitcher like this? Like, there's nothing to compare this to right now.
It's true. I have no idea where it's going. And then you add on top of that, like, second surgery on the elbow.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the part where you're like, how long into the future can you reasonably project him to be effective in both of these roles? I have absolutely no idea, because health may just be the answer. It may just be elbow is not good enough to pitch at age 34 or 35, so he's going to play defense instead. Like, that could be part of the equation. There's just a lot of ways that this could play out over time.
But also, Ohtani is going to stick with it as long as possible. I heard something I hadn't heard before on the pregame. They were talking about how him and his dad kept a journal, and they were talking about the different things they put in the journal. And one of the things that Ohtani ended up putting in the journal was a plan for his life, when he would get married, when he would do this, when he would do that. And apparently in the journal, he said something like, I'm going to retire at 40 and I'm going to throw a no-hitter in my last start. So,
I mean, okay. How old was he when he wrote that?
Yeah. That was, I don't think that was part of the story, but it might have been.
Or was he 22?
Yeah, but I bet you some of the things he wrote in that book did come true at the time that he sort of said they would.
Yeah, I mean, some of those things you have a lot of control over, and some of those things you have almost no control over at all. But I think, maybe manifest positive things by saying they're going to happen. I guess that's maybe part of the mindset there. Nevertheless, I am excited to see what we get from Ohtani as a hitter the rest of the series, and thinking about both starters, Bieber and Ohtani. If this series goes 7, we'll have an off day on Thursday. Game 6 is Friday. Game 7 Saturday. I think both starters would be available in some sort of throw day, everyone's available capacity. And I think when you start to calculate your bullpen choices between now and a possible Game 7, I think you're going to be a lot more aggressive, knowing that you have earlier in the series starters available again in that sort of role, right? Because I think we could see both of these guys pitch in a possible Game 7 for an inning or two, and it would not be surprising to me whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think also the particulars of this game opened up some possibilities for both teams in that they didn't really go to their A bullpens.
Generally, no, but there's one guy that pitches pretty much in every game for the Blue Jays, regardless of circumstances. I thought they could let Chris Bassett finish it out. I mean, guy that started all year. I know he pitched in Game 3. He didn't throw that many pitches, though, so a back-to-back for a guy that was a starter might be pushing it a little bit. But Louis Varland again?
Louis Varland, man. I had to look up. Jeff Samardzija once told me that like 80 is the hard cap on appearances, or was it innings? Oh, it was he said 86 or 85, and he had 88 innings. Samardzija did as a reliever in 2011. I had to go look and see if he ever had, if that was a year that they had postseason. He did not go to the postseason that year. Varland this year, I don't know if he'll get all the way to 88. Yes, he
one
will.
away. He's one.
His
next one,
86.
His next one is number 88. He has made 87 appearances so far this year, and I think maybe, just maybe, the location map is a reflection of some cumulative wear and tear and some fatigue on Louis Varland. This is not a good map.
I call this the reverse donut. When you've got somebody showing their best command, they're all along the shadow and not in the center. As Discord, one of the Discorders mentioned, shout out to the Hive. This looks like he's either throwing it down the middle or nowhere near. That's kind of true. I think he needs to work on his command. I think he's probably a little tired.
And now I'm thinking, is he even really available for Game 5? Like, they had a 5-run lead. Like, what? Why on earth was Louis Varland pitching in this game?
Well, okay, so the other thing that I did want to point out, though, is that Bassett was fading pretty fast. And maybe it's fine with a 5-run lead, but since they have this velocity split by inning now, you can see that Bassett was 94 on the sinker in the 7th inning, and he's already 91.8 in the 8th.
Yeah, remember, that's a big enough drop where something's clearly wearing down. Okay, I'm on board with that as
it's a long time.
Don't leave him in situation
that since he'd done back-to-backs too. So you're asking a lot. I just think that they didn't want to blow the game, so they still wanted to use a credible guy. But back to your point of Ohtani and Bieber being available in Game 7, I think that almost everybody is available, maybe other than Varland, is available for both these teams today, because they get the rest day, the travel day, and then they also know Game 7. So maybe from here on out, there's no coddling of the bullpen.
Yeah, there might not be.
If you could say there has been any coddling, we just talked about Varland. Varland is also one appearance away from tying Brandon Morrow for most appearances in a postseason. And I don't think that really worked out for Morrow. So I fear for Varland. I thought Varland might be a good sleeper for saves next year. Depending on Hoffman's health next year and Hoffman's velo, I could see Varland taking saves from Hoffman next year. But what if Varland himself is reduced from all this?
Completely fair question, because it has been a heavy, heavy workload. I wonder if they'll just even ramp him up a little slower in spring training and be kind of careful with him in early March, just trying to like give him as much time as he needs to recover from what has been an extremely heavy workload this year. A few other news and notes from Game 4 before we look ahead to Game 5. That Vlad Jr. homer, his 7th of the postseason. That's a new Jays franchise record. That record was previously held by Joe Carter and
Joe
Jose
Carter.
Yeah, not a surprise, right? I think you would have at least got Carter, and you might have got both in that instance. I saw Nathan Lucas, 2 hits against Ohtani, still got lifted for a pinch hitter anyway. And that's when Ty France hit that little cue shot over to the right side that actually did bring in a run. So, I don't know, hard to second guess it, but I think people were upset in the Discord. Like, come on, Nathan Lucas is out here hitting left on he's got 2 hits against Ohtani. Give him a left on left against Banda. Like, how could that be any harder?
Right.
I did see a really good piece from Ben Clemens of Fangraphs about the intentional walks that Ohtani received in Game 3. As you might expect, the math suggests that none of them were a good idea. None of them. Not a single one.
Because you're putting on the winning run.
They were really... They were ranked mathematically in terms of how bad they were, but none of them were a good idea.
Oh, man. But yet, I don't know. Like, that's a legendary heater. Like, there was somebody like pointed out like Ohtani at bats at home at some point. It was like homer, double, walk,
yeah,
homer,
double.
double.
But it's an insane heater. You have to cope and deal with it and not just give up first base. I think the double intentional walk was really bad in extras because it loaded the bases. So then a walk could have beat them when they wanted to get the matchup of Lauer against Freeman. And, well, it worked. So no one was that mad about it because result was good. But the process behind that was very, very risky, to put it mildly. So really good read over.
I thought it was also the one moment with Louis Varland on the mound was interesting. He had Max Muncy behind him at second base and was clearly uncomfortable with that. And he just stepped off the mound 3 times to send Muncy to third just so he couldn't look in his glove.
Which, with that big of a lead, I don't hate that. I think like, hey, don't.
It looked at first like he was flustered and that Muncy was somehow like flustering him, and you're like, God, don't worry about him. And then you saw him nodding with his catcher, and you're like, oh, that was on purpose.
Yeah, he does not matter. Do not think about Max Muncy. Like, in this instance, that is a very unimportant run relative to the hitter.
Well, he just didn't want Muncy to give away a pitch that then leads to a homer, and then you're like, okay, now it's getting tight.
Right. Brings it within 3. Big problem in that case. Let's get to the Game 5 preview. We get a re-rack of Trey Yesavage versus Blake Snell. How do you think this one might be different the second time around,
I don't know. The big thing that I'm looking at, because I think that Snell has a couple ways to change. He's got 3 pitches and he's been showing decent command. I think it's hard to say exactly what Blake Snell will do in this game, but Trey Yesavage, I think, in order to do well in this game, needs to rediscover his splitter. It's his biggest weapon. And what you saw was he didn't use it in the game. And there's a chicken and egg question because the Dodgers didn't chase it. It was the lowest chase rate of Yesavage's career. It's a short career, but the lowest chase rate, lowest usage rate of the splitter. So which came first? And I think that some people are giving, again, when the things look good, is it credit to the hitters or is it, detriment to the pitcher? I think this is a chicken egg question, but I have some other graphs here. It was the lowest, like the most drop he'd had on the splitter, which you might say, oh, that's good, except that it came with the lowest velocity on the splitter. And that's 2 straight starts now. And interestingly enough, even though it's 2 straight starts of the lowest velocity on the splitter, he had a totally different break on the splitter the game before. So I think that Trey Yesavage needs to be able to throw this pitch 84 miles an hour so that it looks more like his fastball. And he wants it to actually have a little bit less drop, so it looks a little bit more like his fastball. Because I think if it's 83 and has the most drop, I think that the hitters are like, that is not going anywhere near the strike zone. You know? So he needs to make it look a little bit more like his fastball. And I'm sure this is one of the first times since he discovered the splitter that he's lost it. And so I guess it's a question of, can he re-find it quickly?
I think there's also some yearly fatigue questions that would probably come to mind here with Trey Yesavage. I mean, he's in uncharted territory. A young pitcher getting to a point in the calendar in which he has not pitched before in terms of just time, but also in terms of volume. And if that pitch is not as crisp, maybe part of that is just losing a little something due to fatigue. If he gets it back, he looks like a different guy than he did in game one because the mix will be different.
I mean, he was throwing a ton of sliders, and I feel like the danger here is if it doesn't come back and he throws those sliders again, they've seen this weird pitch, and they just saw it. And, there's been some debate about whether or not when you see a starter a second time in a series, you see the same effect as when you see relievers. And I've seen some research in different directions, but I think the best research suggests yes. When you see a starter the second time in a series, you do better against him. So he needs to have that splitter because then he can be like, actually, I'm a different starter. I'm the guy with the splitter.
Yeah, I mean, it could be fourth, fifth, sixth look. And if we're talking about third and fourth looks against relievers being a big deal, then I would think those starter looks would have to matter too. The variable for all of those matchups for me continues to be the number of pitches that someone has. Wider mix gives you a better chance of offsetting some of that. But I think the main concern with Trey Yesavage is he already used the best backup game plan he could. That was game one. I don't think they have another thing they can do that's as effective that the Dodgers haven't seen yet if the splitter doesn't come back. So I think that's a really good thing to highlight. As far as the Snell game one, what did the Jays do that made their offense go against him, given how well he had pitched up to that point in the postseason?
Well, that was the game where we were talking about fouls, and then they ended up fouling a lot. But I wanted to look at where the fouls were, and it was a bit of a revelation. These fouls are in the strike zone. I mean, if they're not in the strike zone, they're in the shadow zone. I looked, and of the 22 fouls, 21 were in the shadow zone. So in the shadow zone or in the strike zone or the heart. So the Blue Jays batters weren't fouling off. They weren't chasing. They were fouling off Blake Snell's pitches to get to their pitch. And, that's like Varsho, fouling off high fastballs so he can get a low pitch. And other people doing the same thing. And so I don't know. I think maybe... Could you be wilder? Could you try to turn those fouls into misses by being a little bit further outside the zone? Could you bring back the slider? He doesn't throw the sliders at him, but could you throw high sliders so they think that they're high fastballs, and then you get a miss instead of a foul? Could you throw curveballs when they're expecting changeups? This is where what you said comes into big play. He has 4 pitches. They're all really good pitches. And the slider itself is one that people don't really game plan that much for because he usually just uses it left on left. What if he doesn't? So there's a lot of wrinkles here with 4 pitches that are all really good. And just the revelation that they weren't fouling off chases, that makes me a little bit more pessimistic. It's like, what can you do, man? You were throwing good stuff into the zone. And they were just fouling all off. But I think you can still just play with that and be like, okay, if they're fouling off high fastballs, let me throw high curveballs and high sliders, and if they're fouling off low, maybe throw some low fastballs, even to people that might be a pitch that they normally like. They're looking for off-speed stuff.
Don't throw another one to Dalton Varsho, though.
Yeah, that's right.
I think... you can sneak something like that by sometimes. I don't know if I like that as much with the fastball right now against this team, especially. I just think the Jays are good enough at hitting fastballs where.
I mean, generally, they're taking that weapon away. They took that weapon away from Glass now, which is pretty impressive because he has a good fastball and he was all of a sudden throwing sinkers. So, yeah, that's something about taking the pitcher's fastball away that makes, you can only throw so many breaking balls. And if you start being predictable with your breaking ball uses like Glass now did, now Kirk can be like, okay, I'm switching. I'm setting curve,
Yeah. I think I like Snell in this matchup the way a reasonable person would, though, because I think the main thing that could be better, aside from tweaking that game plan, I didn't think he had great command of his fastball in particular. So I think if that fastball command is a little bit more dialed in Game 5, I think he can elevate it a little bit more, be right at the top of the zone, maybe get the occasional called strike up there, and then push the swing and miss fastballs up a little bit higher. Because if he's commanding where they have to make a tougher decision, that's going to open some things up for him. So I think that's something I'm going to watch real closely, especially early on. If he doesn't have that, then I'm guessing he's got a different sort of game plan that he's going to try and execute, because
he'll dial down the fastball
work.
Usage like pretty hardcore if he doesn't have that. And he's done games where he's had 15, 20% fastball usage, so he can do that again.
Yeah, I think that's where he'll go if he's not locating at and above the top of the zone consistently the way that he wants to. Any other thoughts on Game 5? We don't know if George Springer's going to go. He did not play in Game 4. They're saying he's day-to-day. They're making it seem as though he could play, and they didn't take him off the roster, so that certainly bodes well for the possibility. Even if it's not Game 5, maybe another rest day for Game 5, the travel day, maybe by Game 6, he's good to go. But anything that you're thinking about?
My inclination is that he's out for the series because obliques don't seem to be like day-to-day thing, but they're calling it hour to hour. So maybe what they saw in the MRI was basically there was no strain. And it's just inflammation or soreness or something.
Yeah.
Certainly looked like a strain to me.
Leaving mid-plate appearance, he didn't make it worse. Like maybe that's sometimes we're like, oh, he left in the middle of plate appearance, he couldn't finish. Maybe he knows that if he had taken another hack, that it was going to get a lot worse. I don't know, but we'll see if Springer does in fact get the green light for Game 5.
I think Barger's really interesting in this one because he may not start. And I think that would be that'd be a bad move.
Did you start Barger? Just hit him lower in the order?
I think I would. Just have him there, I don't know. Miles Straw, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. I'm not getting much from them.
I am not a builder of real baseball teams, but if I were building a roster, I don't think I would have either one of those guys on it. I know they bring great defense to the equation. I know the
that's
versatility.
Part of how they won a lot of regular season games. Like their defense, they were good at defense, and they had a really good defender. You remember, Varsho was slowed at the beginning of the season, so to have Straw, but you could build a roster where you have Straw there for the first month, and they say thank you very much, we got Varsho back.
Right. It's tough, but I think they just seem so overmatched. IKF had an atom ball at Max Muncy that actually could have brought in runs. It almost turned into a double play on review. It wasn't in Game 4. And that was as I was making that same point in Discord. Someone's like, well, you scalded that. I was like, yeah. He's not terrible. I just don't like the outcomes you're expecting with the bat enough to give up offensive potential for the glove. I just don't like that.
Defensive replacements, they're pinch runners, somebody got hurt, and we need, IKF is actually really good for that because he can play everywhere.
And maybe I would have IKF on the roster, but not Straw also. Right? That's like both of them being there is just a little bit
and
of
then choosing to play them over somebody with Addison Barger's pop potential. I know the lefty splits, blah, 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 whatever, but all it takes is for Snell to put the ball in the wrong place. I mean, Varsho. Varsho's been a guy who's been platooned. Varsho's been a guy who you might not play against lefties, but he has enough pop. And that's where Barger is for me. He has enough pop that I'm saying, I don't care if he goes, 1 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. I think that one might be pretty special.
Could be a double. Yeah. Could be a homer. I mean, there's a lot of A lot of things that can go right when you hit the ball that hard. I hope they throw him in the lineup this time around for that different look. And some of that might hinge on Springer's availability. Like if Springer's in, then they got to shuffle everything around. Maybe they feel like they got enough power. They can use him as a better weapon against the reliever of their choice a little bit later. We'll have to see. One last thing before we go. Hot take safe zone. I don't think this is that spicy of a take, but we're at the intersection of two food seasons right now. The pumpkin spice season, which due to seasonal creep, I feel like begins around August with some products. It's still on for a couple more days, and after Halloween, it slowly fades. And the beginning of what I think is the new trend, cranberry season. Have you noticed this?
Yes, I've seen cranberries everywhere.
Cranberries are seasonally. This is when they're in season, but the flavoring and actual use of cranberries, cranberry English muffins, delicious. My hot take is that cranberry season is actually better than pumpkin spice season. Not because pumpkin spice season is terrible, but I think because cranberry season is truly underrated. So I think cranberry season is better. I think it's just a better. I don't know. It's a better deviation from the norm. And maybe that's because pumpkin spice has become everywhere.
And pumpkin spice is not really pumpkin.
Yeah. Have you eaten a pumpkin lately?
It's the spices associated with pumpkin. Spices you put on pumpkins. It's not pumpkin itself. Whereas cranberry is like the actual taste of the thing, Mm-hmm. And what I also love about cranberries is, and this is why there was a trend in beer that was annoying me for a while. Beers have gotten really sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I like over the West Coast hazies, over the East Coast hazies, is West Coast hazies finish with more of a grapefruit finish, more of a sort of little bit bitter to sort of put in opposition to the sweetness. And cranberries are great like that. Cranberries are inherently bittersweet, which is just a great combo in my estimation. We were talking about mixed drinks earlier. Like if you're making a mixed drink, you got to put the bitters in. You got to have a little bit of something else in there. You can't just all be sweet smacking me in the face all the time. I know that's what the kids want, but I want a little bit more nuance. So I fully support you on that one. I don't even really take that much part in pumpkin spice season because I'm not a coffee drinker. I don't, but when am I going to get pumpkin spice?
I'm not a pumpkin spice hater, to be clear. I just think people should be more excited about cranberry season than pumpkin season. And I think the moment where pumpkin, this is not the fault of the pumpkin spice lobby. Somebody,
if there is one,
I'm sure there is a pumpkin spice lobby. There's a lobby for everything. Someone somewhere thought it would be a good idea to have body wipes that were pumpkin spice flavored. I walked past a giant display of them in the grocery store. And I think
you don't think they'll do cranberry. You don't want to be like, oh, cranberry body wipes.
No. I don't think the food should overlap onto the toiletries division. They're just we should not have that. That's not a hot take. That is just, those are guidelines. That is just basic decency. But I mean, there was a display as tall as me.
One step away from just taking the pumpkin and wiping in my armpit.
Yeah, why don't you try that? You'll smell great. You learn all about pumpkin spice doing that. That was the pumpkin spice has jumped the shark moment. Again, not the fault of the pumpkin lobby. Somebody in a boardroom somewhere at the company that makes body wipes was like, how about pumpkin spice? It's fall.
Yes.
I think I was just walking. I walked through the store. The display was as tall as me. I saw it and I said, no. And I just kept walking. Like, no chance. We can't have that. Producer Brian wants to know, what about apple juice season?
Yes. I'm finally going to have a sip of breakfast. Cheers.
Cheers. That is... It just looks like an undercarbonated beer on the camera.
So refreshing.
But it is apple juice season for Eno for the next 12-ish hours or so before he goes to sleep. We are back tonight for our Hangry Eno episode of Rates and Barrels. Really looking forward to that.
I honestly don't know if I'll make it. I will be very angry.
Could be pretty spicy. Could have some more hot takes. Could have another hot take safe zone. But thanks to producer Brian Smith putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you early Thursday morning.
Thanks for listening.